All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we have Wheel of Time talk, and we're going to overanalyze another of the Forsaken, which is why I have my 333 shirt on. And yeah, we're talking Demandred today. You went on
Hmm.
some rabbit holes. We had previously discussed that we weren't going to talk him because he seemed vanilla, but your son was reading the books
Yep,
and he was coming up with a lot of interesting questions, which actually fleshed it out a little bit more. And you came across some stuff. So we're going to
yep.
go through that. That's why I've got Bad Men and Sun Tzu behind me and a sacrificial dagger for the Sharans. And you've got
And
your could be good or could be evil coat
yep,
on.
I've got my and that is where I feel like there's such a frustrating gap in the middle because when we first see
Hey,
Demandred,
sometimes the gap in the middle is where you want to be.
oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
he's really interesting. You're like this guy, we've heard about him, and now we're seeing him, and you think when you meet him, because what started me down this is my son got to Lord of Chaos, which the biggest part of the prologue is Demandred's POV, where you see you see Shao, where it's really gross, it's really creepy, it's scary. You learn just what it means for a Thakandar blade to be forged, um, which I mean, he does not shy away from the evilness that's going on there.
Yeah, well,
And then
which
he
which
kind
was
of
Agonor's
disappears.
work, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then he kind of disappears. But then when he comes
I opened
back,
straight to the page of Demandred.
oh, there you go.
And there you go. It is
When he
willed by the
comes back,
gods.
it's like, wait, I feel like I've missed something. And we did, because that's what the short story is that I have no real desire to go out and find. Um, the short story, which is all the cut parts from the last book because they decided it was too much of a distraction, which is Demandred in Shara fulfilling all these prophecies. And so you have a kind of Thanos element of Marvel's biggest problem early on was they had too many one and done villains, excuse me, that weren't notable. And then when you got to Thanos, you're like, oh, I understand this guy. He's evil. He's terrifying, but I get him. And he is the hero of his own story. He really embodies that idea. Um, but there's that giant chunk in the middle that's missing. And so that is that is one of the frustrating things about Demandred. And I should have said this right off the bat, but this will be spoiler heavy big time. So if you have not fully read the series yet, go away. Um, because we're going to be exploring
Go away, but
multiple
come
parts of
back.
him. Yeah. Come
Subscribe
back,
so you
come
can
back
come
when you're
back to
done.
this. Yeah, this will be a
Yeah.
365, I think. Yeah.
Go watch us along as we go through the books if you're reading along. Um anyway, but what actually started this thought was when he was talking about the my son was talking about the prologue, and I remembered um that scene where Demandred is getting orders from the Dark One. And then you fast forward to the epilogue, and he's right back there saying, "Have I not done well, my lord?" And the Dark One's laugh fills his head. And it reminded me that we had touched on this, and I meant to circle back when we got to the last battle and we got to the big reveal of what Demandred had been up to and where he had been. Is wait, what the heck is he even talking about? What did Demandred do in this book in Lord of Chaos that so pleased the Dark One? And that led me to another little side rant here, which is something we talked about last time a little bit, which was um, the lack of depth when it comes to our thinking and our reading, and how that is a problem. I don't know if you've had time to look at these studies. There have been a number of big headlines lately about people who rely on large language models show a marked decrease in cognitive skills tests. And I don't know if you've had time to look at those and see if it's junk science or if there's a there, but I mean, it
There's a
certainly makes
there,
sense.
but we're seeing that progressively with just the Google age as it
Yeah.
is, anyways. So
I was getting annoyed with the GPS and I finally stopped using it and remembered, hey, you know how to navigate and you know how to look at a map. Just look at a map and figure out how to get where you're going and remember the street names. And I already feel smarter.
yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I brought up the taxi cab drivers in London
yes.
and how there's actually a physiological change in the brain that well, I'm going off memory here. The frontal lobe of the hippocampal region is greater in gray matter mass
Yeah.
in the London taxi cab drivers because they have to memorize every route. And they actually compared them to the bus drivers as a control group because the bus drivers just have to memorize a specific route that they take every
Yep.
time, but they're still driving because they wanted to take driving spatial memory and driving out of the equation. So they compared them to the bus drivers and the ones who had to learn every location in London basically by intersection, not by Uber, but not by little Google Maps or anything. And they had a much greater gray mass area. And that was compared to their scans before the study, too. So it wasn't just that they were good at the job because they were already that good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I was lamenting to my son missing the um, online community from the late 90s and early 2000s when I first got into the series. And it wasn't just that, hey, I miss those days, hey, those are the nostalgic. It's these online sites just don't exist anymore because people just go to a wiki or a Reddit or now an AI uh, answer. And back in the day, you had essays. Okay, so I found this sadly from 2005 is how far back it goes. And this was a detailed theory. This is on the theoryland.com website. And besides just the message boards of the back and forths, is the other section they had were theories. If you had a big detailed theory that you wanted to lay out over an incident or a plot point or whatever, and then there was a space for that. And as you see, if you're looking here, um, you would lay out your arguments and there are big chunks of block text to support your argument. You are citing the sources of I think this because of this. Here is the text from, you know, Lord of Chaos chapter prologue, the first message. Here's the quotation and all this. And and then you go down and then there would be some back and forth of what people thought about the theory, and you just don't have this anymore. I think the last time I went and looked on the Theoryland forums, the most recent post was from like 2013. So it's just completely dead. And it's a darn shame because there's still plenty to think about and talk about, um, especially now that it's done. And and especially so here because this got me scratching my head of, I hadn't really thought about this, but it makes sense the way this poster lays it out. But I also feel like this may be a nitpick on RJ because I don't know that he really showed this to us. Which so the theory here is let the Lord of Chaos rule through Balefire.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the questions my son had was who's the Lord of Chaos? And um I actually kind of just accidentally discovered that too. That's one of the rabbit holes I went down because I always assumed it was the Dark One because that's kind of one of his names.
See, I always thought it was supposed to be Rand.
And you are correct. But I
Good.
actually, the more I thought about it, is like with so much of RJ, I think it's more complicated than that because I think it's Lords of Chaos
Mm.
is really the better way to read the book and what happens in it. But the the point about Demandred and what he is doing is um let me just read here from Sporkster. Sporkster, great online name there. And one of the most memorable moments of the Wheel of Time series, Demandred, a Forsaken whose actions, motivations, and whereabouts are shrouded in mystery, is seen briefly at the beginning of Lord of Chaos. There's been a lot of discussion on the Asmodean comments that occurred during this one-on-one with the Dark One, but often overlooked is another important item. The Dark One gave him a mission. The theory is this: Demandred's mission was to begin to weaken and potentially unravel the pattern through the use of balefire.
Well, he
And so he,
definitely did that in the last battle.
yep. And this is again where I thought, especially now in the conclusion, this is why I want to revisit some of these things because, wow, definitely in the last battle, but where was this before? And so how does this stack up after? So let's see, this is 2005. So this would have even been before Knife of Dreams came out. Or no, it was around the time this was published around the time Knife of Dreams came out. So I don't know if this guy included any of that or not. Um, so there's still plenty of book left, and as you say, definitely in the last battle, he is wielding a ludicrous amount of balefire, and you see the result in the moment. Anyway, so the quote from the prologue. This is the Dark One speaking. The chosen dwindle, Demandred. The weak fall away. Who betrays me shall die the final death. Asmodean twisted by his weakness. Ravin dead in his pride. He served well, yet even I cannot save him from balefire. Even I cannot step outside of time. For an instant, terrible anger filled that awful voice. And could it be frustration? An instant only. Done by my ancient enemy, the one called Dragon. Would you unleash the balefire in my service, Demandred? And as the poster said, what so many of us focused on at the time was the part about Asmodean, because this is the prologue of book 6, and the very end of book 5 was, whoa, Asmodean just got killed. Who did that? And it
Yeah.
was a big discussion. Um, and so the Dark One asked him to unleash balefire in his service. What would the result of balefire be? Jordan spells this out for us in the next segment. Demandred hesitated. A bead of sweat slid half an inch on his cheek. It seemed to take an hour. For a year during the War of Power, both sides had used balefire until they learned the consequences. Without agreement or truce, there had never been a truce any more than there had been quarter. Each side simply stopped. Entire cities died in balefire that year. Hundreds of thousands of threads burned from the pattern. Reality itself almost unraveled, world and universe evaporating like mist. If balefire was unleashed once more, there might be no world to rule. And then going down, he says, of course, because you don't say no to the Dark One. Here is the important point. Then listen and serve. Hear who will die and who live. The Dark One asked Demandred if he would use balefire in his service. Immediately after, the Dark One gives Demandred a list of who would live and who would die. It doesn't get much plainer than this. So what this theory is that the list of who will live and who will die, it was specifically the Dark One picking out people for his minions to nuke with balefire to weaken the pattern. Now, the weakness of this is we never see it on screen. So that is, if you go to look at this theory and you read the whole thing, and it's quite lengthy and well written, but then a lot of the points against it are, okay, yeah, but who are these people and why do we never not only see them, we don't really hear about them? You know, wouldn't a good way to use this would be to pick someone who's important, but not so important that they're hard to get at, like Dobrain, which they do try and kill later. There's an assassination attempt on him, but when Rand's bouncing around and not around, you couldn't get in close enough to Dobrain to balefire him. How would that weaken the pattern as well as weaken Rand?
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of the weaknesses of it. But I think the strongest point in favor of this is twofold that he touches on in the theory, but I don't think explores enough, which is, what is the Dark One's prison? The pattern itself. That's one of the reasons the Dark One wants to destroy the pattern, not just to remake the universe in its own image, but that's the Dark One's prison.
Hmm.
So after Lord of Chaos, we start to see more of the bubbles of evil. We start to see more of the instability. And then by the last three books, you have massive problems, things like the wards in the White Tower, which are supposed to be eternal, are failing.
Hmm.
And, rats are getting in, food is spoiling. That's not supposed to happen. Then you have the pattern itself getting all funky with rooms reshaping themselves, buildings reshaping themselves, and then finally the big one are the dead walking. So
Hmm.
you see the effects of the pattern weakening, and it hadn't occurred to me this isn't just the Dark One getting stronger, this is also the pattern getting weaker. The two go hand in hand. um so I still think there's a bit of a but how does this tie directly to this book, and what in the world was Demandred doing here? Because we don't actually see him during the book. We just see him in the prologue, and we see him
Hmm.
again in the epilogue.
Well, can we think of any major characters that did disappear?
Not that I can think of.
Hmm.
And so that's, to me, that's another problem with, and why I wish these kinds of sites weren't dead, is because, we need the nerds to do the work and dig through the text and say, no, I remember this guy or that girl disappeared, or we never heard from them again. Um, and so part of the rebuttal was the whole point isn't to kill important people, it's to weaken the pattern. So
So
it
just
doesn't
killing
have to
random
be.
Sharans for a while. I mean,
Well, we'll get to
he
that in a
probably had,
second.
yeah, he
Yeah.
probably had to get to the upper echelon, so to become Bao.
Yep. Um, the other thought that I had, that I thought this would support this theory more, that wasn't in here, is that I wonder if Demandred feels like he can take credit, because this seems more like a Moradin thing. Rand starts using Balefire a lot
Hmm.
during this time. Um,
He blew up a whole freaking building,
mhm.
or made it disappear, I guess. Not blew it up, but
Well, uh, that was when he had gone off the deep end,
yeah.
when he nuked Grendel's
Hmm.
uh, palace where she was. But even before then, really starting here, um, he's not afraid to use Balefire, and he uses it quite a bit.
Well, he killed
So
Robin with Balefire.
a big chunk of it too.
Hmm.
Um, he uses, we see moments where he uses like finger thin bits of Balefire to snipe dark friends and shadow creatures. So I think that is also an element of Rand being the Lord of Chaos. He is adding to this chaos as well. Now, my question was, and where I wonder what you think, and if Scott and Isomorphic, if you're out there, is this something Demandred can credibly take credit for? Because it would seem to me that if this theory holds, and it seems plausible that in the prologue, that's what the Dark One is talking about, is using Balefire to weaken the pattern. And in the epilogue, he's saying, have I not done well? Well, okay, but what did you do? How did you have a hand in making this happen?
Hmm.
And so that's the part that I go, I don't know about that. Um, because it doesn't seem, um,
Unless there was supposed to be a reveal later that we never got.
yeah,
That's always a possibility.
that is distinctly possible as well. Yeah. That maybe there was supposed to be more about Demandred in Shara and what he's
Hmm.
doing. Um, the main thing to me, and what I think most people, and what I always took this to be, is the epilogue was, because of what happens right before it. I think it was assumed by most fans that the epilogue Demandred is referring to Dumai's Well because he created chaos by creating and we know this for a fact now. At the time, it was thought that this was a strong support for Demandred, that
Mm-hmm.
Mazrim Taim was Demandred. Um, and he wasn't, but he was the one who recruited
Mm-hmm.
Taim, and he was the one who put him forward as a potential new Forsaken. And so not only do you uh widen this divide between men and women and between side in and side R channelers, but you've also weakened the tower itself because of all the rumors that are going flying around after Dumai's Well,
Mm-hmm.
because of what Dumai's Well does to Elida, and how it allows Alvierin to grab more power within the tower. So there's
Well,
a
not only
lot of
that,
chaos that spins out.
you create madness in Rand.
Yeah,
I mean, how
yeah.
many times in the next the rest of the books do we hear, I'm not going to be in a box again? You,
And it is that is credibly something Demandred could take credit for because Masana is the one in the tower directing the Black Ajah, and Demandred is kind of the leader of that triumvirate
mm-hmm.
of Simmerhaj, Masana, and Demandred, and so he could take at least some degree of credit for look at what my plans are doing. Look at how they're coming to fruition. Um,
But also, how was Taim released? How was he rescued?
I believe the Black Ajah let him loose.
Yeah. Okay. Because I'm just trying to think of who could have been bail fired in this entire time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is where we get into the other bit of the interesting rabbit holes. Um, so that was point number one. Question number one is, hey, um, what the heck is Demandred talking about here? And within the book, we don't see much, but then after the fact, is some of what he's referring to what he's up to in Shara? Is that part of what he's bragging about? Right. And so that was the thing that I'd put a pin in when we were reading through, and we talked about this uh, the prologue and the epilogue here in real time, and I meant to circle back around to it, and then I remembered we didn't, and so I went on to uh, the database on Theoryland of interviews and Twitters and Q&As and whatnot, and I found this little tidbit that made me go, wait a minute. So this is the other bit that I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on of what do you think about this? So this is from Twitter, 2010. Somebody asked Sanderson, is it possible for us readers to figure out Demandred's identity with the information we already have? Sanderson's response, and now Theoryland is holding its breath. I think I might have actually answered on tour. I'm not sure what RJ said on the matter, but I will say only this. There are clues. I think it could be figured out. Maybe. It's much, much harder than Asmodean's killer. Obviously, I must be tight-lipped. Can it be figured out? Yes. Will it will it make you smack your heads and say, I should have seen it? Probably not. Um, and somebody confirmed that RJ had said you could figure it out, because something I either had forgotten or didn't realize as I went through these is that in the early 2000s, RJ started saying repeatedly in Q&As, time is not Demandred. He just started telling people flat out. And it took a while for people to believe it because he so rarely gave such straightforward
You
answers.
you want to know what the big clue to that was?
Mm,
The description of Demandred is he was not especially good looking. And when you first meet Taim, when Rand meets Taim, it says he's actually strikingly good looking. So
yeah.
they both have the hawk nose, which is what everybody attached themselves to.
Yep.
But one is not very good looking, and the other is considered to be good looking. So he actually did throw a clue in there for you.
But he said, I let it basically, I'm paraphrasing RJ, is that when he was asked this and then people said, whoa, you're giving us a straight answer. And he said, yeah, I let it hang out there for a while so that people would think, talk, explore. But eventually I got tired of people asking me, and I want you to look elsewhere, is one of the things he said, is stop looking at Taim. It's not him. Look elsewhere.
So we were blinded by the Taim light.
Yep. And
Yeah.
that was one of the reasons he gave the straight answer. Um, and so one part of this back and forth from Sanderson was this idea that does Demandred have an alter ego? If it's not Taim, is it someone else? And you actually see that in the book. That was actually something else that came through when I was scrolling through here, is that people thought, is remember when they're going to sign the Peace of the Dragon and Rand goes up to what's his face, the King of Miranda, Rodran,
Yeah.
and he looks him in the eye and goes, wait, it's not you. And somebody asked Sanderson, was that an intentional fourth wall break? And he said, no, that's not a fourth wall break. It just occurred to me, as both a fan and the writer, hey, if we're all thinking about this, how much more are the people in the world thinking about this?
Hmm.
And especially Rand, who is imperative that he deal with the Forsaken. And you have this one major figure that has built up a power base for himself, and nobody really knows anything about him. It would be logical that Rand might think this could be Demandred.
And
He's
see,
the only one around
he
him.
could have even hidden as a someone Rand already knew because of his skills and the was it misdemeanors or whatever. The He could have been someone like Agilmar
Mm-hmm.
because he's a great enough general to be one of the great generals. He could have been Ituralda, and we would have never known it, except we got point of views from Ituralda. But
Mm-hmm.
from Rand's perspective, he could have been one of the great generals. He could have been Brine for all we knew.
Yeah.
That would have been a plot twist.
Um, Also from Twitter, there was an interesting bit where somebody says, now they don't say who, so we don't know if they're right or not, but somebody says, I believe I figured out who Demandred is based solely on Lord of Chaos. Is this possible? And Sanderson's reply was, it might, in all caps, be possible. I honestly can't remember where all the clues are. Um, Now a little later on, uh, down in the Q and A's, he does give a more definitive, you should be able to figure it out by the end of Winter's Heart. And that really made me scratch my head and think back. I mean, we never see him. So does anyone say anything? Is anyone mentioning Demandred? Is anyone talking about Shara? The only clue we get, and I couldn't remember where this was and I couldn't find it, is that I remember somebody saying that there was unrest in Shara. And I think it may have been one of the Aiel chiefs talking to Rand about news of the world, and whoever it was, it says, what does that have to do anything with anything? And the person says, there's never any news out of Shara. So the fact that there's any news and the fact that there appears to be civil war there now, that's a big effing deal. So I that's the only clue I could think of. And I can't exactly remember where that is. I don't remember if anyone else does. Okay. Now we get to uh the Lord of Chaos specifically. And this is where you were right about Rand. And I had forgotten this. This is referenced in the book. in Lord of Chaos, because I think this is what's going on when Perrin is um walking around in Karheen wondering where the heck Rand disappeared to. But it's also in the Big White Book. So somebody asked in 2011, who was the Lord of Chaos that Demandred and Taim both mention? There has been tons of debate. Sanderson, really? I thought that one was obvious. What's the debate about? Uh, Therese, who's one of the main people on Theoryland, it's Rand. Look in the Big White Book regarding Feast of Fools. Why? So the original poster asked, why was Demandred and Taim saying let the Lord of Chaos rule if it was Rand? Sorry, just read through the series once so far. Here's a quote for you: The Feast of Fools. Celebrated in Tamaz in Eredamon and the Borderlands, or Savin everywhere else, the exact day varying according to locality. A day in which all order is deliberately inverted. The high perform lowly tasks, running errands, serving at table, etc., while the low do no work and give orders to their usual superiors. In many villages and towns, the most foolish person is given a title such as the Lord Lady of Unreason, Misrule, Chaos, or the King Queen of Fools. Not an honor sought, but for that one day, everyone has to obey whatever orders, however foolish, are given by the chosen one. Called the Festival of Unreason in Saldea, the Festival of Fools in Candor, Fool Day in Barelone, and the Two Rivers. And this is where somebody linked the theory that I started with about the balefire, and that's where I found it. And Sanderson's reply was, that is a good theory for people to be reading. And somebody says that theory has been on the rocks for years because of contradicting tour reports. I didn't say, Sanderson, I didn't say the theory was true, just that you should study it. But I'd like to see those tour reports. All right. So basically, some people, after this theory had gone up, people had asked RJ about it. Here's the thing, though. RJ invented the Aes Sedai, so he talks like an Aes Sedai, meaning I've mentioned this before. He's very economical with his language because he's very precise with his language, which means he also expects you to be precise in your language. So if you don't know exactly the words you said and then exactly the words he said, you're going to get led astray. I mean, remember what is one of the first things we learn about Aes Sedai? When Rand goes and tells Tam what's going on, and Tam says, tell me her exact words if you can remember them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led a lot of people to think, oh, this theory has been debunked. No, the questions about it were imprecise, and so parts of it may have been debunked, but the theory itself was never really debunked. But I think that's interesting because even way in the end, at the end of Knife of Dreams, when the group of sisters go, led by Pavara, to say we're gonna make Ashaman our warders, and Taim says sure, and they say what, really? And he says, yeah, haven't you heard the saying, let the Lord of Chaos rule? In hindsight, that kind of makes more sense and also clues you in on why all of the Dark Friends are laughing, because Rand is the fool. Rand is if not the Lord of Chaos, he is the King of Fools here. And in his trying to make things work, he's actually making things worse because
Mm-hmm.
of something we actually talked about last time, which is his inability to share his burden.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of like the old adage too, like squeeze the soap and it pops out of your hand, right? And
Yeah,
Rand kept trying to squeeze the soap. Hopefully he wasn't in prison. But
hopefully not.
hopefully not. Well, he was in
Yeah.
a box.
So, and if you go through the database, there are some various statements kind of supporting this idea that the there's at least some degree of merit to, yeah, what the Dark One was saying there in the prologue was, I want you to start unleashing balefire. I want to weaken the pattern.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but
No, this is one of the whole thing we're discussing right now is probably my biggest complaint about the series
mhm,
is the Demandred storyline. because yeah, you wanted it to be a surprise in the end, but like he said, it was harder than the Asmodean killing, which was almost unsolvable just reading the books. And it this is again the complaint is it would have been better to more flesh out the Sharans before just throwing them into the most important part of the
Yep.
whole thing.
Yep. Yep.
And if you had done that, you could have included more clues in there that something was going on. We got one discussion, and I remember what you're talking about with the IEL, where they were like, "Oh, there's unrest over there." Well, we had a character that could have contributed to this, which was Jane Farstrider.
Yeah.
No, no, we had a character that could have contributed more, and that would have been a good vessel to bring us into that world. And
Oh yeah.
then rumors got to Tanchico or whatever, Ibudar, wherever they were, and he could have been like, "Oh, that's not how they do things," that kind of stuff. Oh, something weird is going on over there. Oh, he could have even brought up the story of Bao ahead of time before you meet him as Bao.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
could have been like, "Oh, they believe. Oh, this thing is going on, and this culture believes in this."
They have their own prophecies of the
Yeah,
dragon,
exactly.
and
Yeah,
this is what they are. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's not something that couldn't have been done. And it's not like we didn't read through 14,000 page books. We could have read through 14,010 page books
Yep.
to get that.
And this is why the little short story about Demandred as Bao the Wild is so frustrating, is because one of the other things I found when I was scrolling through here is Sanderson saying, as an offhand comment, by the way, this is quote, by the way, Demandred was bale firing whole cities, because someone had asked him about, did he have all of the shards behind him? And he said a big chunk, but no, not all of them. There was a civil war. He had to seize control.
Hmm.
And in that seizing of control, he was bale firing whole cities.
Yeah, and we could have got a
That's a big
hint of
effing
that.
deal.
Yeah, we could have got a hint of that.
So I think the only clue there is the prologue, the idea about unleashing balefire, Demandred's thought about balefiring whole cities, and now all of the sudden, starting in Knife of Dreams, I just saw it. I'd forgotten where it was, but the a town in Shiota is the title chapter, where Matt and his group come across a city from out of the past, a dead town, and the peddler tries to go through it and sinks into it,
Hmm.
right? So I think that was the first big holy crap, the pattern is unraveling. Um, and really that's kind of the only clue, is you, and that's a big stretch, and it's a big post hoc. Oh, wait a minute, which I don't mind a post hoc. Oh, now I see it. It's I kind of like that in things like Ocean's 11, where they show you at the end how it happened, what really happened, and like, oh, I get it now. But it's better if you can say, oh, I was wondering why that guy did that. I was wondering what that thing was all about. If it's just completely out of the blue, then it's, oh, okay. And it's pretty completely out of the blue.
Hmm.
It is our main nitpick with RJ, with something that combines both a problem with RJ and with Sanderson.
Yeah, yeah, because at the same, even if RJ was planning to start the reveal in the books that he wasn't able to write, he should have had a note that said, "Hey, we need to do this,"
Mm-hmm.
instead of just springing it on everybody. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, any more thoughts on that before I get to the last interesting tidbit here?
No, no, no. Let's go. Let's move on.
All right. So this comes from a Reddit AMA from 2013. And this made me go, huh, that's actually interesting. And I still like our ideas about the duels and Demandred's death better, but this does make a really good point. Um, Let me go ahead and share this because it's kind of lengthy. So somebody asks, I'm also wondering about the several duels with Demandred. Isn't Gawain a bit too weak in this book? From the previous books, Gawain was said to be able to easily take down other warders and even win in a practice against two warders together. Then, with a single blood knife ring, the wearer is supposed to have superhuman strength speed that can't really be matched. And he was using not one, but three rings. While Galad has been established through the series to be better than Gawain, I find it strange that Galad was able to hurt Demandred with nothing but an imperfect Foxhead medallion copy, while Gawain, with three blood knife rings and warder bond, didn't remotely stand a chance against Demandred.
Well,
All
that's an
good
easy
points.
answer. That's
Well,
to me is an easy answer because Gawain was arrogant. Remember, Demandred beat him by surprising him by using the power.
and goading him,
Yeah, yeah,
cheating, not fighting fair. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Galad anticipated that.
yeah,
And so even though he had less of a physical advantage because of the Foxhead versus the rings, he had the mental advantage of anticipating that Demandred was not going to fight fair,
yeah.
which is what you need to do in a real battle, my friends.
And so I like Sanderson's answer, and I think it also gives a little credence to my idea that I talked about when we were going through the series. That I think Sanderson was trying to rehabilitate Gawain to an extent, or at least make him more understandable, even if you don't make him likable, because of this answer. Sanderson. Godwin is good, but not really, really good. In addition, he has an inflated sense of how good he is. He doesn't have the inner control and understanding to be a fully capable swordsman. So, as an aside, that's one of the final lessons Brian is trying to teach him: is, son, you got to get control of yourself. You've got to, no matter how good you are on the outside, if you are torn up on the inside, you're never going to achieve your full potential. And that was, so there's an aha moment there, but also a bit of a I wish we would have seen a little more of that in the text, because I think that could have been fleshed out a little more with that mentor mentee relationship, that was trying to happen at the end when Galwin finally goes uh, to the rebel camp. Um, Back to Sanderson's quote. Beyond that, he mistakes power for ability and lets himself grow too reckless. Finally, having enhanced abilities such as the ring grants him doesn't immediately give you the skill to make full use of those abilities. Gawain tried and deserves credit for that, but in the end, he had not spent years preparing himself properly to win that particular contest. And I don't remember where it was, but somewhere else when he's talking about the back and forth, the duels against Demandred, is he makes the point that Gawain is a tragic character. His story is a tragic story. It is supposed to end badly, which is one of the reasons I kind of bolsters my idea that he was trying to rehabilitate him, because you don't you don't have that emotional impact if you don't give a darn about the character.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of the right words for this because I was thinking about this in a conversation with somebody else not that long ago. It was two equally matched people in a fight. The difference is mental.
Hmm.
And Gawain never got out of the phase of, well, we called him a simp a lot, right?
Yeah.
But the thing about a simp is you think of the simp. Okay, we talked about that with this with nice guys, right? Nice guys, simps, they're kind of the same thing in a lot of the ways. They do all the things for the other person and they say, I do this for you, but it's actually for me. And Gawain never got out of that phase. He had to win for him. And so he got arrogant, he got brash, uh he rushed it. He did some crazy things with those rings. He did a lot of things. And it was all about him. Where Lan came in was he did it because it was his duty and he was not afraid to die. And he loved Nynaeve, and he wanted the world to go on. That's it. Galad was something in the middle, right? Like he couldn't get over himself in some ways, but he wanted to be part of the greater good. And so Galad was somewhere in the middle. That's why he did better. But Gawain was all about himself.
You just segued me into my big point about that comment from Sanderson, my big kind of aha moment that makes me really curious what Jordan's notes were and any writing he had on that scene. Because my aha moment, and literally in my notes, it's aha exclamation point. That's why it had to be Lan who killed Demandred, because that point that Sanderson made about um, he had not spent years preparing himself properly to win that particular contest. What is it we learn about Lan from the beginning? He is a one-man army. He is fighting a one-man battle against the shadow. This was Lan's closure. He won. He finally won the unbeatable, the unwinnable battle that he thought was going to kill him. And it nearly did, but the it's just a shame this wasn't in the text. There should have, now you don't want to spoon feed, but there should have been more there in the text to close that circle of, we started out here in Eye of the World learning about Lan, um, most specifically when they're camped overlooking the Seven Towers of Malkir, and you learn from him what that means and
Mm-hmm.
what it means to him and why his one-man fight against the shadow is his whole life
Mm-hmm.
until Nynaeve comes along. But it's also why he's able to win, to your point, because he had spent 20, well, more than 20 years. He's about 40 years old, or 40
We
something years
it was
old.
44, I think we looked it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and and he said, when I was an infant in the cradle, my parents put the pommel of the sword in my hand and swore the oath for me. So literally his whole life has been spent in this endeavor. And that is why, uh, you know, mechanically speaking, as a story, that's why it had to be Lan. As much as we spun out our ideas of how it would be, if Abel or Tam, I really like the idea of it if it had been Abel,
Well, yeah,
but
because it would have been the arrogance versus the farmer,
mm-hmm,
that would, but it would have paralleled the story from book three,
mm-hmm,
and that would have been cool. Uh, but yeah, no, this was the second best option.
mm-hmm.
Although I would have loved Galad to have come through on this one personally, because Sanderson spent so much time investing us in Galad in the last three books, and that
Yeah.
would have been good, especially with the avenging of his brother. That would have been a very good
The
ending too.
avenging of his brother and the supporting of the half brother he just found out he has.
Yeah, yeah.
And also a culmination of, this is why he joined the children, to fight the shadow.
My biggest problem with the Lan arc was the Matt arc that got him the medallion.
Yeah.
It was so quiche and not. It was like it was. He went back to the what was the first book Sanderson wrote? 12. Yeah, he
13.
13. No, because it
12 was Knife of Dreams.
okay. So with the first one with the back and forth with Tominese and
Yep. Yep.
yeah, it went right back to that to get him to the medallion.
Gathering Storm. Gathering
Yeah,
Storm.
yeah. And I was just like, okay, this is where it gets kind of, but
Oh no, you're right. Knife of Dreams was 11. So
yeah,
Gathering Storm was 12
yeah,
because
because
there's
we ended on
14 books
14 and
total.
he wrote
We
the
ended on
last three.
14.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I got discombobulated there. You're right. So also, as I think I made the point in the time when we were going through, is that really Lan had his closure by, and this was our frustration with the way he was acting after Nynaeve dropped him off at World's End, is his real arc wasn't about winning a duel, winning a one-on-one fight against the shadow. It was about accepting that he is a king and that people want to follow him and that he needs to lead them. And he did that. And to me, that's what gave him closure. That's what brought it full circle is no, I'm not fighting a one man battle. I'm a king. I'm a leader. I'm leading an army.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that rallies the troops when it turns out, oh crap, they have manipulated and corrupted our captains, and Agomar cannot be trusted anymore. And he's the one that rallies the troops and saves what can be saved of the Borderlander army, and then continues to lead that group of them during the last battle itself after Matt's taken over. So to me, that was his arc. But reading that comment made me go, I'll bet you that is why it was probably planned by Jordan that Land would be the one to kill Demandred.
Well, and we could have had more from Sanderson leading up to it, because now that I'm thinking back to book 6, book 5, book 4, there needed to be something with the Aiel. Analayan, the man who stands alone.
Mm.
And we could have had Aiel helping him up to the hill, and just a comment just out of one of their mouths, the man who stands alone, and then he fights Demandred alone. We could have had something like that, just something to tie things together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There needed to be a little bit more connective tissue there. And to be fair, there's a lot going on, so it's
Yeah.
understandable that stuff gets cut, that stuff gets left out, because there is so much going on
Well,
there.
wasn't there supposed to be a whole nother book though? Was it?
No,
It wasn't supposed to be 15.
no, it was supposed to be one, and then they said, "Oh, there is no way we can do it." Sanderson was supposed to write one book to finish it,
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
then he and Harriet got together and they went through the notes and they planned things out, and then they released a statement that kind of made the fans annoyed because they thought, oh, this is Tor just milking it, and it was no, there's just way too much to do here. Um, and there were a few moments, as we've complained about. You brought up one of our most despised, which is Matt's back and forth with Tominus
Yeah,
at the beginning of Gathering
there were a
Storm,
lot of wasted pages.
where
Yeah.
where it's where it is the same kind of frustration that we had with the series, which was, why are you inventing your own crap when you've got so much source material? And there were times where it seemed like, Sanderson, are you just inventing your own crap, or are you actually fleshing out the notes and writing out the rough drafts that Jordan left you? But there was also a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of good, even if it wasn't Jordan himself. There was still a lot of good, so, which is why it worked and it gave a satisfactory conclusion, if not the conclusion we would have most liked, which would be the one by the author himself.
Mm-hmm.
And something like the series didn't work because, for all his faults, Sanderson understood, this isn't my world. I am finishing James Rigney, Robert Jordan's world. I am finishing his work,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a tremendous amount of respect for that.
Oh yeah, the fact that they alienated him was the first sign, right? It was the first sign. As much as I think that he fumbled a lot of things in the last 3 books, if he was at least extremely involved in the screenwriting, it would have been so much better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And he even talks about it, where he's just like, oh, well, I forced this and I did this, but they wouldn't listen to me on this. And, and it's just like, okay, yeah, okay, I get it now. I get it now. You're trying. You're trying.
yep. Yep. Well, that's all I had. It was just some interesting thoughts that
We
I
didn't even
had.
get into Demandred Psych, man.
That may be a whole episode on its own, because he is the man who was always second. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
He's
there's a lot of short man syndrome there that really isn't deserved, because he is a heck of a guy on his own,
okay. So what it
but he's
makes me
not the
think of
guy.
is not this Olympics, this past Summer Olympics, but maybe 2 or 3 ago. Remember Justin Gatlin?
Mm, sprinter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You
Who
okay? So you do remember him.
who
So
was always right there, but he
so
happened to be racing against Usain
he
Bolt.
broke world records in his sprints, except that he was racing Usain Bolt,
Mhm.
who broke the world record ahead of him.
Yeah.
So his sprint would have broken the world record, except that he was racing the guy who broke it better
I hadn't even
every
thought about that.
single time. And
Oof.
yeah, that's gotta hurt. That's gotta hurt bad. And that
Yeah.
was Demandred. Oh,
Yeah.
here's a good one. Tanya Harding.
Mm.
Look how that turned out. Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding. I'm the best skater in the world, except Nancy Kerrigan exists. So what happens? She hires a guy to take her out at the knee.
Literally. Yep.
Literally. Yeah. Yeah. So this is what envy and jealousy does. And jealousy is a fucked up thing because in actual sexual relationships, it's very simple. On the male side, parental certainty. On the female side, is he going to leave me with a baby? That's it. That's what it boils down to. If you understand those two things, you understand jealousy when it comes to relationships. When it comes to achievement, it gets really complicated. And this is the most jealous man in the whole series.
Mhm. And it drives him nuts.
Yeah, and I think
Literally.
it was
Yeah.
overplayed in the last battle scenes, but I think if we had more build up, it would have been better.
And I think that's the real disappointment. It's not just that he came out of nowhere with the Sharans and it's, oh, wow, where did this come from? It's also and he's a raving madman. And this isn't the same person we saw in Lord of Chaos.
Hmm.
So what happened?
Was it the
And
moment?
yeah,
Yeah, you had to have some kind of maybe even a perspective of him getting ready for battle or something. That would have been okay. It'd be 5 pages, maybe 5 pages.
well, if anyone out there has actually read River of Souls, which is the short story of Demandred and Shara, let us know if there's a there and if it's worth reading. Otherwise, what are your thoughts on these questions of what exactly is the Dark One talking about in the prologue, and what is Demandred bragging about in the epilogue? What are your thoughts on that? But then also, do do you think you can actually figure out where Demandred is and what he's up to by the end of Winter's Heart? And if so, what are the clues there? If there's something I'm not remembering, if anyone has an idea there. And then of course the last one being, and then what do you think about his end? Was it a good end, or was it anticlimactic like we kind of feel? Or a little unsatisfying? All right. Well, that's all I have for hopefully a much lighter episode than we had last time with impending World War III, or who the heck knows.
I thought the Robin Williams stuff was worse,
Oh,
but
geez, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was harsh.
that was
Man, that
the
was harsh.
majority of the episode. How did you forget about that?
Yeah. No, no, the Robin Williams one specifically because it was such a gut punch.
Hmm.
Um, that yeah, I mean, but that was what we wanted to talk about, which was men's mental health. And
Well,
speaking of
look
what
at
guys
Demandred,
do,
right?
yeah.
Men's mental health. You are actually comparing yourself to other people a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the same as females where it's social media is killing girls right now. And I just listened to a long interview with Jonathan Haidt with Jordan Peterson on social media and all of those aspects with how they're affecting females, but also males. And we compare ourselves to others, but it's achievement with males. It's not beauty, it's not attention, it's
Mm-hmm.
not all of that. It's what have I done lately? And that's actually how we're judged. So it actually makes evolutionary sense that that is actually a trigger point for us. And so I'm going to rehash that because it's a good message to end this with. In Men's Mental Health Month, men who are in that state of I feel like I haven't done anything lately. We have to figure out a way because we live so long now.
Mm-hmm.
If we were in the fucking bush in Africa, I would be the long of tooth if I even survived. And they would be like, "Oh, I remember your hunt of this and da 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 da." We need to figure out how to keep those men alive mentally that have served in the military. Maybe did some tours in Iraq, maybe did some tours in Afghanistan, uh, maybe was a line worker that worked 5 hurricanes, that kind of stuff. Because we can't sustain it forever because we're human beings and
Yeah.
we're physical beings. So at some point we can't sustain it, and then you start having those ruminating thoughts of, I can't do this forever. Demandred's different because he's almost immortal, right? He's got this power that keeps him alive for a very, 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 very long time, and he's vital at this point. But when it comes to men's mental health, it's that middle age where you start declining that is the danger zone. No one cares what you benched in high school. Let's go to Married with Children, right?
Love
I
that
I
show.
once had 4 touchdowns for Polk High School, right? Uh, that was the thing that kept him going, and we got to change the messaging from not no one cares what you used to bench in high school to, whoa, you did that? Oh, I wonder what you could do now. Let's train. Let's do something together, right?
Mm.
That's what we need to change the messaging to, because right now it's very of course competitive, right? Oh, you did that then, well, you're an old man now. Oh, you used to make that much. Oh, you lost your job. Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
we need to change everything on that. So yeah, that's my final message. Sorry it was somber, but it's important
Yeah, for sure.
because we're all going to decline. If you're somebody making fun of the old man, guess what? You're going to be the old man at some point.
Oh yeah.
And you're going to want this voice talking for you. So,
All right. Well, we started the year talking about resolutions and trying to stay on track. So, I mean, if you're in a spot where, man, I feel like that, then shout it out because, if no one else will see it and will comment and will say, hey, you know, maybe here's some things you can do to
yeah.
help yourself up,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, community, man. Community.
All right. Well, we will see y'all next time.
All right. Later.